that's a great idea. I grew up in this area. I grew up not in Grand Haven specifically, but close enough. I grew up in Fruitport, rural Fruitport. And so I end up painting a lot of nature paintings, and I think that's very much in tune with how it was for me growing up, because I lived on 40 acres and I did not have a visible neighbor. So on those 40 acres, my parents, oh, well, it wasn't like that. We had a pond. And my dad would try out different types of farm animals, and so we had a different. I had different models to work from in growing up out there, and I grew up with. I was going to share a couple slides of my family. Growing up, I have one or two brothers, one a year older, one a year younger, and then a sister who's 8 years younger. So, and here's those slides. Thank you very much. So, yay, Trace! Very nice. So these are some pictures I don't often share, but to show you a little bit of the era that I grew up in, as well as, I don't think I have a pointer, but the one is my cousins, the other is my sister, the different dogs and cats we had. And then down here, my two brothers and myself, and I had that fuzzy hair that I still have. So a few more pictures of me as a child growing up in rural Michigan. And we had a pond out back of our property, and I used to enjoy just rolling in the mud, jump in the pond, wash it off. So it was kind of it has ups and downs as far as growing up out there, but I know it really encouraged me as an artist. And I loved to draw growing up. My husband and I were married at that pond. Outdoor wedding. It was kind of hit and miss. It was supposed to rain that day, but it did not. So my sister and his brother stood up with us. And then after I went to kind of a jump ahead, I ended up going to Kendall College of Art and Design. Growing up in the area, I did love to draw, and my high school art teacher encouraged me, Mr. John Crayley, because we're in this area, he encouraged me to go on to pursue art. So Hallmark Cards came to Kendall, and they recruited me, and a few other people have been recruited by Hallmark. Lori Keller's here, and she was recruited by Hallmark as well. So the headquarters is in Kansas City, Missouri. The birds, I guess, was our first foray into our own animals and my inspiration. And I have illustrated hundreds, if not thousands, of greeting cards. And you can see that the ones that I share here show an array of different animals. And then what happened after my husband and I got married and moved to Kansas City, our first baby was born, and Camille has been a great inspiration in my children's book, illustrating. And here she is growing up. My mom and my sister down here with her as a baby, and then there she is as a teenager. And guess what we gave her when she was 15 as a teenager? We gave her what any 15-year-old girl would want, a baby brother. That was another little bit nuts. I know I used the quote about Anne Lamott and about, I think we're all pretty crazy on this bus. I'm not sure. I know anyone who's got all the dots on his or her dice. And we have run across very few people that have 15 years between their children in the same marriage. But it's lively. So Camille in the middle with her baby brother, and down here before Chase was born. So this is a picture of our family 10 years ago. So just to share a little bit about, sometimes after illustrating for greeting cards and for picture books, I like to be able to paint just for me. So I'm going to share just a couple slides of something that I'll do, and I'll have a photograph and I'll be inspired. And this one's this small, so. And then Camille on the beach, blowing bubbles. Another portrait moment, but this one I took a photograph for myself. And this is the little girl that I saw at Idlewild, the jazz festival. And this one again is very small. It's of a potter in the White Lake area. His name is, or he goes by Peter. Peter. Oh, nice. You recognize Peter. And there's my little Chase, all bundled up. And here he is with one of his favorite dogs. And the dog made it into the art. I titled that one Van Gogh's Dog. And Chase made it into a picture book. If Jesus Came to My House. It's a book that I re-illustrated. The little version, if you remember, black and white and red, has been in print since '52, but they asked me to add some color to it. And now I'm going to share, like I said, the process that I do when I do my art. I start off with little teeny sketches. They're called thumbnails, and that gives me just an idea of what I'm going to do on each page. So then I take it a little further in my sketchbook. And then maybe these are some interim paintings or drawings. And I'll do a few drawings before I settle in on what I photograph. And this book is called Read for Me, Mama. And here I'm painting on the cover, but this is the hug. And this, because of Doris Rucks, her son, David Rucks, and his wife, Delphia, and her grandson were the models for this book. So I went to an alternative service in Central United Methodist, and that's how I met this family. And again, the roughs for this book, I'm going to paraphrase and share with you this story. And so here's the sketches. Here's the little boys that I photographed. I found them at a church service that we went to, and they were really good sports. So this was possibly a cover art that I would do, and then I photographed them this way, thinking maybe this would be the good fire helmet kind of scene. Could this possibly be where they're looking at this fire helmet? And as I paraphrase the story, you'll know a little more about the fire helmet. And I ended up on this, settling on this. Photographed them again. And the story is by Tim Hoppy, who is a New York City fireman. And there it is in color. Tim Hoppy was a first responder on 9/11. And I read inside today, just to verify, he did not put that in here, in his book about the fire helmet. But as I said, I'll paraphrase the story a little bit. The fire helmet sits on the boys' dresser. And in the morning when they get up and get ready for school, sometimes Christian, who's the younger brother, he is 6, and Tommy is 10. And so when Christian wears the fire helmet, he still believes in its powers to give him to become brave. But Tommy does not any longer believe in the powers of the fire helmet. They go to the pediatrician's office. Maybe somebody here knows my model for this. It's Dr. Galvin, who was my son's pediatrician. And so Dr. Galvin checks out the boys and says, "You've got a good, brave heart there, Christian." And as mom kisses them at night and tucks him into bed, she sometimes goes up to the fire helmet and whispers a couple things to the fire helmet. And of course, Tommy remembers the time that the chaplain gave them their father's fire helmet and said, sometimes you might want to touch this to become brave. And think about that. And when Christian's afraid at night, Tommy will bring that fire helmet to him sometimes just to help him out. Now, Tommy still believes in the fire helmet, but Christian does not. And sometimes Tommy is, I have to get the author's words on this page. Of course, bravery is not just about getting a shot without crying or going to sleep in a room full of shadows. Sometimes you have to be brave just to get out of bed. Eat breakfast, brush your teeth, and go off to school. That's how Tommy felt most mornings. It's hard to explain. He wasn't even sure what he was afraid of. And he would sometimes go down and take a walk by the lake where he and his father used to take a walk. And of course, this morning he found that Christian was following him and said, hey, we're going to go back home. And wouldn't you know it, when they turned around to go home, Christian tripped and fell over a stump and fell into the water, and Christian couldn't swim. So Tommy made an attempt to rescue, but yet Christian couldn't get to that log fast enough, and the current was taking him. So Tommy had to rely upon some of the words and advice that his father gave him. He said, you can lose a fish, his father used to say, just don't lose faith. The fire helmet floated past. Tommy could have reached out and touched it for courage, but he let the helmet pass him by. Instead, Tommy touched his fingers to his heart, struggling to find his own courage. You can do it, he told himself. He took one big step out into the water, and then Tommy reached out over the water farther than he could ever thought he could. Grab hold of the branch, he talked to Christian. I can't, Christian cried. You can do it, Tommy told him. You can do it. Tommy was wide-eyed with fear. He gasped for air, and his arms flailed up and down. Tommy shouted, courage, Christian, just like Dad taught us. He then embraced himself and held tight to the branch, and Christian grabbed hold. So at the end of my story, which I don't have the picture to share, they came through the door, and their mother took one last look at Christian and said, all right, let's hear what happened. I'm the mom of a son now. Christian told her mother about falling in the creek and being swept away, and then he told her all about the rescue and how daring Tommy had been in fishing him out. That night, after Mother tucked him into bed and kissed both boys goodnight, she walked to the dresser. The fire helmet sat there looking sooty and worn and still a little bit soggy, just the way a good fire helmet should. Before she could bend down to kiss the helmet, Tommy crossed the room and stood at her side. Sounds like you were really brave today, she said. Maybe tomorrow I'll get up early and go fishing. So as a 9/11 responder, my author, who sometimes you don't meet the authors, I haven't met him, but he, as a first responder, lost a friend in one of the Twin Towers. So he dedicated this story to his friend that he lost. If Jesus came to my house, and in this part of the story, our son, Chase, is modeling with his friend, who I thought of when the boys were little as an old soul. And so the boys actually did that in real life. So my son is not here to embarrass him, but I loved it that they grabbed hands in that spontaneous moment. And then in this story, the little boy brings Jesus around to his house and imagines showing him the garden. So, of the quotes that you so generously let me share, we must accept infinite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. And I'm glad that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did not say always. We discussed that earlier today, and sometimes there is not that hope at the ready always. In this picture, it's actually an etching that I did of a bicycle, and it is way before this event happened in my life. I was born with the bicuspid valve, and come to find out, bicuspid valves in your heart can lead to aneurysms. So, in a checkup, kind of a typical checkup, because I had no signs, they found that I had a ascending aortic artery aneurysm, and that was 7 years ago. When I was waiting in the waiting room for the heart surgeon, then now my heart surgeon, to give me the information about what he would be doing to save my life, I was scared. I had never had open heart surgery before, so it was a little frightening to hear what all was going to be happening, and prior to the surgery. And the reason I share this picture is that something I encourage people to do now, to be able to find some peace in a moment, is to find your creative gift. Pull it out and use it. What I had was a sketchbook. So in that moment, I took my sketchbook out and I started to draw what's in here. So I found a paint, or no, it was a photograph on the wall of a bicycle in France. I started to draw, and peace came over me. I mean, not total peace. I was still nervous, and when he came in to give me the goods, I was more nervous. It elevated again, but it helped me, and that really surprised me that in that moment I could find some peace. So I have in the past gone out with my easel. That's my easel, and it's a little travel easel, and I paint from life. And what that means is that I paint something in front of me. And a gray day, it might be a little monochromatic, meaning it's all the same color. But I find joy in those moments now when I'm out with my easel. And not every moment I have bad results, and I have to forgive myself. So with this quote, but I always think that the best way to know God is to love many things. So when I'm out painting and seeing something with the light of the day, because we only see with light, I'm enjoying the joy of being able to enjoy that moment just with the light on something that I'm painting. So this is actually rough, not the final art, for a assignment that I had when I was 2 days before open heart surgery. I received a job. And that job, and my art director said, "Are you available?" The deadline is 2 weeks later. And with a leap of faith, of course, I said yes. And yes, I will be able to do this. So thankfully, the outcome was good. I wasn't really mobile, and yet as each day after recovery came, I became stronger, and I did complete the painting. And I'm going to share just some slides of the joy of painting. And usually these paintings that I do just for me are this big. And now for joy also. Celebration. Gratitude, not understanding, is the secret to joy. I'm grateful, and I'm giving back a little bit. One of the quotes was about teaching, so I'm going into schools now and doing something akin to an artisan residency. And I find great joy, as well as like the kids here, their observations are wonderful about finding that joy. And I always love it when I go into the classroom and say, a show of hands of how many people here love to do art. And there's almost always a big show of hands. And how many people here feel that you're really an artist? All the hands go up. I love that. It's positive. So they were giving me a hug. And so, to conclude, there were, as I said in the art journey, there were some moments, and I shared in a TED Talk about these plein air paintings and how much joy they bring me. When at the University of Michigan, and prior to heart surgery, they have a lot of tests. So there's a CT scan room that I went to a few times, and I noticed laying there on the table a notebook. It's kind of just a regular spiral bound notebook. And when I opened it, I found that people who had gone into the women's locker room had written notes in there. And they are very, very profound notes. You know, I have cancer, stage 4. They say I only have so many days to live, and so on. There are just, and I was privileged to see into some strangers' hearts, the people that were able to share that and that did. And so I know when I do these plein air paintings that I also am tapping into the heart and the joy of the moment. And I just really want to share with you, and I hope that if you take anything from what I share with you today, make sure to find a moment in your day that you share and enjoy your creative gift for yourself, for the love of your art. Thank you very much.